Hi everyone. As you may have heard, Dr. McDougall recently passed away at the age of 77. I'm not here to disrespect him in any way. I'm going to be very respectful in this video. My condolences to his family. That being said, of course, I will talk about why I believe he died, seeing as it's important to warn people. There is no official cause of death as such. He simply died in his sleep. Maybe later on we will find out more about it. At the age of 18, he had a stroke, which made him very afraid of fat, especially cholesterol. He studied medicine, and because of this, in the end, he came to the conclusion that humans are starchivores, that we should be mostly, if not essentially only, be eating starch. Many people try this diet. Most people got very sick. There's a lot of testimonies out there. If you have an experience with any kind of diet which even relates to it, then you can comment about your experience. We will first look at his early days.
Burger King's new slogan is sometimes you got to break the rules. Let's go in and break a few. I'd like to have a Whopper. Now you say I can have it my way, right? All right, I want a veggie Whopper, and that means no meat. Okay, I'd like to have lettuce, tomatoes, onions, pickles, a little bit of ketchup, a little bit of mustard, and no mayonnaise. And I'd also like to have one of your garden salads with your low-calorie dressing.
The only reason people eat burgers is because of the meat inside. And if I would recommend anybody to eat something at Burger King as a last resort, then I would recommend only eating the meat. Essentially the opposite of what he's recommending.
Do you remember the Wendy's slogan, "Where's the beef?" Well, who cares when you can eat like I do? Hi, I'd like to have a baked potato with broccoli, but no cheese. And I'd like to have the salad bar with lemon wedges. And how about a glass of water?
That's it, a potato, which is starch. Did he say broccoli? I wasn't really sure what he said. Broccoli something. It's green leaves. Broccoli is a flower, which means that he would be filling up his potato with a flower. If you eat a raw potato, then you can get very serious food poisoning. It can actually be deadly in large amounts. Potatoes are also sort of high in oxalates, which create kidney stones. I wonder if Dr. McDougall ever had problems with kidney stones. Broccoli has sulforaphane, a potent toxin, goitrogens, which mess with your thyroid. It's not a healthy meal. Not that there's really healthy meals at Wendy's, but if you'd only eat the animal foods, then it would be at least somewhat healthy.
Well, we hear all the time that stress is a real important factor as far as causing disease. But you know, the disease...
That is very interesting because back in the day, people understood that stress is a problem way more than people do now.
The people suffer from these days, heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, cancer. I mean, these are diseases that have only been around 100, 150 years.
That's very interesting. Yes, the first heart attack was recorded around 100 years ago, actually. And diabetes, all of that, that was all unheard of because people used to eat naturally. In most places, people ate over 90% animal foods, a lot of raw meat, way more raw meat than people eat today. People still eat a lot of raw meat dishes in many countries. In Germany, people eat raw pork on a daily basis. It's called met. They eat it with bread, but still. In Japan, pretty much everybody eats raw meat, sushi, sashimi, all kinds of raw meat dishes everywhere. Siberia, Ethiopia, many places in Africa. Even in a place such as the United States, people eat steak tartare, carpaccio in restaurants. But back in the day, people used to consume a lot of raw meat. That's why people were not sick, and they were also not eating any processed carbohydrates, vegetable oils.
Many of you are interested in jogging, and that's good. But more and more of you are suffering from injuries of your knees and ankles related to the jogging, and that's bad. But there are alternatives, such as bicycling, and that's what this segment is about. Are you ready?
It actually feels like he really meant well, as if he really wanted people to be healthy. It's just that he was very misinformed about food and even about exercise, because on one hand he talks about stress being bad for you, but then on the other hand he promotes exercise, which is considered to be very extreme stress biochemically. Jogging, of course, also, and it is bad for your knees. And that's because, firstly, humans don't run that much in nature in general, but secondly, they don't run on pavement, which is what the people who jog do.
You need to find an exercise that you really enjoy. I'm here out at the ocean, and this is where I really enjoy getting my exercise. I like swimming, I like skin diving, and I really enjoy windsurfing. Now, it's up to you to
That's all right. It's not really stressful for the body.
find something that you also enjoy. I mean, maybe it's dancing, could be bicycling, swimming, maybe tennis. But find that exercise that you enjoy.
Tennis is a bit over the top. The rest is all right. It doesn't really feel like exercise when you're doing it. We will now skip many years ahead. He was 72 in this video. It's his most infamous video. You will see why.
And I recently interviewed Dr. David Perlmutter, author of Grain Brain, sort of pushing back on it. Because he's
Grain Brain, yeah, all right. There's a
There's
brain dead guy for sure. Go ahead. And I'll make further comments on Perlmutter's book. I've had him on my radio show many years past.
Oh, nice.
In the most respectful way possible. The irony here is off the charts.
Grain Brain, like grains make, that's why we almost lost World War II to grain eaters. And we did lose the Vietnam conflict to grain eaters. Grain is really bad for you when Vietnam and Japan fight us on white rice and almost win. Excuse me, David Perlmutter, you are lost. Get real. We have teeth, we have intestines, we have hands, we have everything that says we're starch eaters.
But at the same time, the research shows that we only ate 35 to 40% of our diet.
That's not true.
Okay,
I have read the research from the proceedings of the National Academy of Science, from every other journal that deals with the history of man.
I think that you can see why there was a lot of so-called drama after this interview was released. A lot of people say that it's showing pretty severe signs of dementia. I have to agree. It was very concerning at the time. This was 5 years ago.
And every single research paper says that we were starch eaters. And not 30% carbohydrate, but 80 to 90% carbohydrate. There is no dissension in the scientific research as to what we were eating. For example, we have research on...
Just in case you don't understand what he's saying, his point is that humans in nature ate 80 to 90% starch.
Would you like me to tell you some of the research? We have research on Neanderthals all across Europe that shows that they were starch eaters. Neanderthals from 40,000 years ago. We have research from Mozambique, from Africa, of 105,000 years ago that they ate starch-based diets. It means the research goes on.
How can you have evidence of humans 100,000 years ago eating a starch-based diet? How could you possibly have evidence for that? How would you know what they ate throughout the day? Just give one argument.
We were always starch eaters. The research does not say that we ate 30 to 40% of our diet of carbohydrate. You need to reread the research. Excuse me, that's my passion.
Okay, no, I get it's your passion, but you have to, well, maybe you don't, but there are studies out there that do cite a lot less than that. And
No.
Let me ask you a question, though.
There are not studies out there.
This is very hard to watch. I always knew about this interview. I had seen some clips of it, but now for the first time that I'm actually watching it, it's really hard.
Studies that go back to the Christian Bible that show that we are starch eaters. And he asked the gatekeeper to keep them in on a vegetarian diet. Daniel in the Bible did 2,600 years ago. The first controlled trial on diet that was done, at the end of 10 days, they declared the men who stayed on the pulses, vegetables, starches, and water were much healthier than the men who ate the king's diet. So we have had controlled trials for over 2,600 years that have clearly...
The Bible is a controlled trial. It's science. What can I say to that? It speaks for itself.
90% of our calories have come from starch in almost all populations. The exceptions have been people who live on the extremes of the environment, such as the Inuit Eskimos. They 7 months a year on the Atkins diet. There are a few tribes in Africa and South America that eat all meat diets or high meat diets like the Maasai, etc. But this is just isolated, small, tiny populations of people. 99.99% of the people who walk this earth have taken the bulk of their calories from starch. That's the science.
99.99% of people who walk this earth, I guess he means everybody who ever walked this earth, ate almost only starch. Nobody has ever come to that conclusion. There are no populations like that. Wesley Price went and visited many populations. They all eat meat-based. They don't eat only meat, but even the modern civilization still didn't eat mostly plants. No matter what kind of plants, it was still mostly meat. And humans purely in nature absolutely eat mostly meat. He said the Eskimos, because of their climate, and he only said 7 months a year. That doesn't make any sense. And then people in Africa. What about the people in Japan eating raw meat, living long lives? The Okinawans, all of the blue zones, eating over 90% animal foods. The Okinawans cook everything in lard. They pretty much don't even have a dish without pork fat. Everything is cooked in lard. Even the very few plants that they eat are cooked in lard. There's just no examples of what he's saying anywhere on earth.
So is it possible that we are seasonal eaters, and we went from periods of famine where we ate massive amounts of starch in the summer and late summer, fall, but come winter and early...
Look at the way he looks at him, because he's questioning him that it's possible that we are seasonal eaters, seeing as starch is obviously not available in a lot of places on earth at all, but in others only seasonally. And the starch that we eat today doesn't exist in nature, as in the starchy vegetables, they are cultivated. They don't exist like that in nature. Potatoes, for example, are this small and inedible the way they are naturally. But this is something that would trigger him even more. Right now, he seems to be pretty triggered simply because he's talking about seasonal eating. We'll see what happens.
Tell to me about your perspective on that concept, that we were in fact seasonal eaters, and we went from high starch to low starch, from starch food fuel to keto food fuel to actually help us make it through a year.
You know, that's an interesting theory, and the first time I've heard that. So I appreciate what you have to say, and I see some validity in it, but.
How could it be the first time that he heard about humans being seasonal eaters? That's really strange if that's actually true.
All this tells me is that the human being is a survivor. We're one of the most amazing organisms ever made on planet Earth. We can live on 2 packs of cigarettes a day, a half a bottle of whiskey a day, and bacon and beef and butter, and survive. So just...
He puts bacon, beef, and butter in the same category as alcohol, drugs, essentially, smoking. That's crazy, but that already shows you his mindset.
The Neanderthals were starch eaters. The scientific research has looked at hundreds of skeletons, looked between their teeth, and found starch granules. So I'm sorry.
Even if that was true, is that actually his evidence? Is that what he meant before? Then it would simply mean that some humans died while eating grains, possibly proving that they starved to death, seeing as plants don't have over 15 micronutrients. And even macronutrient-wise, only living off of carbohydrates is going to lead to a premature death. Of course, it has to. You can't survive by only eating carbohydrates. Or it could mean that they coincidentally died while they had something between their teeth. Humans wouldn't willingly choose to chew on some grains, any kind of starch, but if there's absolutely no food, they are starving, then they will try to eat anything. Either way, that's not proof that humans ate a starch-based diet. It could mean that they once had starch in their mouth, once in their lifetime. It could mean anything. It's really strange to use that as proof.
So here's the elephant in the room. Hunter-gatherers were starch eaters and they weren't hunters. Then, I mean, hunter-gatherers hunted, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's any population of people throughout all of human history who's ever been vegan, except for people like us.
So then,
No natural diet has been without meat that I know of.
okay, then why have a natural diet of 100% veganism now?
Well, because we have religious sects and we have a movement of people out there who believe that being a vegan is important for moral reasons, mainly moral reasons. And one of the problems that I have in dealing with vegans, I was fired from the vegan conference in 2017. I was an invited speaker, and I was fired because I have a statement that says I eat turkey every other Thanksgiving. The reason I do that, whether I eat turkey ever or not, you will never know. But the reason I say I eat it every other Thanksgiving is I don't want people to think what I'm teaching is a vegan diet. What I'm teaching is a diet based on starch, rice, corn, potatoes, sweet potatoes, pasta, bread, etc. Whether or not you have a piece of ham for Christmas, an egg for Easter, a piece of cake on your birthday, some candy at Halloween, or a little turkey at Thanksgiving makes no difference at all in terms of actual health.
That's very interesting. I never actually knew this about him. He did eat animal foods very rarely, obviously. It didn't help because if you eat a plant-based diet, then you're still going to suffer. Maybe slightly less, depending on how many animal foods you eat. He always talked about vegetarianism back in the day, but he most likely ate some fish and some kind of meat here and there. Maybe it really was once a year, once every 2 years. Who knows? Probably a few eggs slipped in there also, but overall it didn't help. It only explains why he could go on for so long.
You do agree that we have to supplement. We have to supplement omega-3s and B12.
No, yes. No, yes.
Okay, which is...
Omega-3, well, you asked me two questions. You asked me omega-3, you asked me B12. The answer is no and yes.
Okay.
Okay, on omega-3s are made by plants only. Only plants can desaturate at the carbon-3 and carbon-6 position, which are the two essential fats. No animal can do that. No fish can do that. No cow can do that, etc.
It's just that the omega-3s which we use, DHA for example, would have to be converted by another animal, seeing as humans can pretty much not do it at all, as proven in studies. That's just because we don't eat algae, for example. We can't do anything with it. We can't do anything with plant oils. Whereas if we eat beef or whatever kind of animals, then we can actually get the omega-3s, the ones that we can actually use directly from the animals, from fish. If you eat the brain has the most omega-3s, and that's because they are needed for your brain, obviously. It will be no problem for you.
So how do you get omega-3 fats? You get them from plants. How does the fish get the omega-3 fat? It eats algae or seaweed.
Yes, because the fish, specific fish, naturally eat algae, seaweed. Humans don't. Humans don't eat plants naturally. That's the whole problem.
Cannot make omega-3 fats. Why not go to the original source, the plants? They're loaded with omega-3 fats. Omega-3 fatty acid deficiency has never been reported in the world.
Again, the irony is way off the charts here. It's really insane.
Buddy, we can do it. But it does not give you the right to be a bad person, wrong word. To be a planet destroyer, a health destroyer in the wintertime because you think you're bacteria chain.
No, you're not getting...
You are not allowed to do that in my world.
I'm sorry, but I feel like you missed my point. I'm talking about in the springtime during a period of famine, not me.
No, during a famine, I would likely eat my fellow passengers on the jet that crashed in the middle of a snowfield.
I'm not talking about I'm not talking about famine. I'm talking about the fact that during the spring, it's a very austere time of year for eating.
Austere means famine. Famine.
Did we slip into...
Famine people eat. But every day is a feast for Americans.
My only question is, on a 100% vegetarian plant-based diet, did we...
Starch-based diet.
Well, in the springtime, did we shift towards burning fat because we didn't have as much starch in the springtime?
I don't know that. I don't know that to be true. First of all, people did not have the option. They still only had bows and arrows. They still had no way of efficiently killing and catching animals. So, no, I don't agree with that. I think they stored their rice.
There's actually a video by a guy out there catching all kinds of animals with his hands, bare hands. I'm going to link it. It may be interesting for you if you believe that you need bows and arrows and whatnot to catch animals.
And their corn and their potatoes in little huts after they dried them out. And when the springtime scarcity came, they just opened the door of their storage cabinet and brought out the starch. Because if they didn't, they would starve to death because the men were so inadequate in their ability to catch animals.
Yes, exactly. Men were always inadequate. And because of that, we stored starch in our huts. That's how we survived.
You must teach them the truth. And that is the human being is designed as a starch eater with fruits and vegetables, and animal foods and free oils are poisons, period. And how much poison you want to eat? It's up to you. I don't care. I really don't care, except for the fact that you are destroying my grandchildren's future. That bothers me a lot.
Well, I want to say one thing.
It's interesting how nobody in his family helped him, or did people try to help him? We don't know that, but it's understandable why a lot of people quit his diet after seeing this interview. You can't blame them. We will now look at his very last video that was released around a week before he died.
I look at myself as a general doctor. My training is in general medicine. I'm a board certified internist. I had a need, and that was to be the kind of doctor who helped people. It made a big difference. And because of what I'd seen on the sugar plantation, because I'd seen the difference in generations, my first generation people from the Philippines, Japan, China, and Korea, they were all trim. They didn't have breast cancer, or prostate cancer, or heart disease, or diabetes. They were working hard to their 80s and 90s. My first generation living on a diet of rice and vegetables, no dairy, almost no meat.
And he still pushed the same diet until the very end. Has he never talked to somebody from the Philippines? Has he never been there? People there eat meat with every dish. In China, in Japan, they eat raw meat. There is no such thing as a dish with only rice. People who are really starving, very poor, would maybe only eat rice. But in general, there's no such thing. And how did he not understand this? Was he misinformed? Why did he never travel to any of these places? He was one flight away from the truth, but he just never got there.
And I saw the kids. They'd get a little fatter and a little sicker as they were exposed to the Western diet. The grandkids, they were unstoppable as far as poor health and physical abuse to their person.
Yes, when they started eating starch, processed carbohydrates, and even if the carbohydrates wouldn't be processed, all the rice. People in Asia never used to eat rice before, just in case you didn't know. That only started when people were starving, especially during the World Wars. Before that, it was completely meat-based. It's still meat-based, but they do eat some rice here and there, of course. His point is that people started eating animal foods afterwards, and that's why they got sick, when it's exactly the other way around. They got sick because of all the grains, the seeds. Seeds are inedible. It's poison. Literally, it's poison. Sean Baker also shared his thoughts about McDougall.
I want to take a moment to comment on the passing of someone who was a vegan icon, if you will. His name was Dr. John McDougall. He was an advocate of something called the starch solution, and apparently he passed away yesterday at the age of 77, which unfortunately is too soon in my opinion. I lost my father at the same age of 77.
Yes, it should be clear that dying at the age of 77 is very premature. We have records from just 150, 200 years ago of people living way past the age of 140, even 150. Dying at 77 is you dying at half the natural age which humans are supposed to live to. Even dying at 80, 90 is still very, very young, but 77 is very premature.
Well, one thing that was clear as he got older and older, he appeared increasingly frail. Had several fractures from falling down in his bathroom, and those things are probably consistent with, in my view, just unfortunate poor bone mineralization, poor probably protein in the bones. And I think the diet, irrespective.
Yes, exactly. A lot of people always talk about calcium and whatnot when it comes to bones, leaving out the protein, not realizing what the bones are actually made out of.
Some people would argue that if you're relatively wealthy and educated, then you should maybe live a little bit longer. But nonetheless, 77 is a pretty good length of time. That's 20 years older than I am. Who knows what's going to happen to me in the next 20 years? I can't say for sure. But
Sean Baker believing that 77 is a normal age to die at is saying a lot.
In my view, I think he was suffering from some sarcopenia and
100%, very visible.
And probably osteoporosis, and probably, in my view, again, his diet was inadequate for that. And I think the same thing, unfortunately, is happening to his wife. Hopefully she'll maybe change her direction. Who knows? Perhaps not. Probably they tend to be dug in at a certain point. I think it's so critically important that we get high-quality protein. And when I mean high-quality protein, I don't mean beans and grains. I mean, that's quite honestly low-quality protein. Things like...
Exactly. It's waste products, essentially.
Meats and dairy and eggs and things like that. And then couple it with vigorous exercise, resistance training that protects you from these sorts of things as we get older.
I'm not going to get off topic here. I like Sean Baker, but of course I disagree about exercise. Humans in nature don't exercise. None of them have this problem. You can have strong bones if you eat enough protein. And of course also on top of that, get the minerals and vitamins that you need, but the protein is essential. There's no need to reduce your lifespan by decades by exercising, stressing your body so incredibly much, just because you may fall one day. You walk around with this mass in everyday life. It's so hard for your heart. And even if you would fall, would it protect you? If you have bad bones, then you will have bad bones. If you eat the natural food which you're supposed to, then you will never have an issue anyway. Some vegans also made videos about him passing away. Plant-based news, of course, or plant-based news. Goji man.
His diet is very similar. It's probably the most similar to the Blue Zone diets of all of the vegan.
And that's, of course, completely wrong. All of the Blue Zones eat at the very least 80% animal foods. The Okinawans eat over 90% animal foods. They almost don't eat any plant foods at all most days. I've talked to lots of people who live there, whose family members live there. I've actually read the papers by researchers who have been there. They eat mostly pork. They cook everything in pork fat. It's the case for all of the Blue Zones. Do these vegans lie? Do they want to believe it? I don't know, but there's absolutely no evidence for what they are saying whatsoever. He was eating the so-called opposite of the Blue Zone diets.
Ways of eating. It's high starch foods, right, with very little fat, and that is how the Blue Zones eat. Most of the
Why do they say this? Is it just absolutely blatant lying? It's very interesting. Maybe they only read this one paper, which was written during World War II, when all of the pigs had died. And that's when they were eating vegetables. They were starving to death in Okinawa. But any time before that and after that, they only ate pretty much pork. It's called the island of pork. Or look at any Okinawan recipes. Typical Okinawan restaurants, it's pork-based. It always has been.
Blue Zones, particularly the Hunzas up in the mountains, I think it's in Pakistan, and the Okinawans, right? Sweet potato, munching.
The Okinawans actually don't eat sweet potatoes at all, for the most part. Actually, as in zero. That's the really funny part.
Day, right? So it is the most similar to those diets. When he says my diet is science.
All right, I'm not even going to listen to anything else he has to say. And then Goji Man also said something.
Now, there have also been speculations from some that John looked very frail and on the leaner side. And to this, I would say maybe. But clearly it is difficult.
Yes. Why would you say maybe? That's interesting because imagine if that was me. I'm 77, I've been eating raw meat for decades, and that's how I look like. Would you then say, maybe? No, you would say, it's the raw meat, look how sick he is, blah, blah, blah. He died because of the raw meat, he looked sick, he always looked sick, and so on. That's what you would be saying. Don't talk like that. At least be honest. We can see that he was sick. it's not disrespectful to say what you see. Overall, I would say that it's very clear that Dr. McDougall was not doing well mentally and physically overall. I was actually surprised that he was still making videos after the interview 5 years ago. I never checked the channel much. I clicked on it every few years. I saw that he's not doing well, but obviously nobody would ever be able to convince him to stop eating like that. Seeing as his family most likely also didn't do anything, or at least understood that there's no point in trying, which are the only people who could ever convince somebody to change the way they live, it was clear that nobody's going to be able to do anything about it. At the end of the day, it always has to come from you. You have to have the motivation to change your life, and your life depends on what you eat. It's what fuels your body. It's what gives you energy, nourishment. If the diet that you're eating is wrong, then you will have a lot of health issues. It's the number one reason. We should all learn from this at the very least. As I said, I don't want to disrespect him, his family, or anybody, but clearly, human beings are not starchivores. I will end the video with that. Thanks for watching.